Our repeated breach of protocol was not taken highly by the Grand Order, even less so by our own countrymen. The fact we had made so many unique discoveries only barely allowed us to avoid a court-martial for the sheer negligence. Before we could make any definitive moves, we decided to actually follow protocol for once, and quarantined Reginald, the forest ranger, in an isolated booth, then started the process of sterilizing and cleaning the ship, just in case. Reginald himself produced some very good results as to what exactly humans were. Bipedal mammals, a common archetype in the galaxy with symmetrical features and 4 limbs with 1 head. Height that varies based on age, skin tones that vary due to certain skin pigments caused by ancestry and environmental factors. Varying genetic lineage by an absurd degree, more so than any other race in the galaxy. And an immune system that seemed at least robust enough to counter most common galactic diseases, save apparently their so-called zombie virus. We were quick to acquiesce to Reginald's request for a meal, and he consumed it with fervour. We continued actually following proper procedures, and in short order, a blood sample from Reginald was being analysed. A truly unique blood type. Despite the wear and tear caused by the permanent circumstances, Reginald himself seemed unaffected by the so-called red flu. The immune system was one of the most complex bacterial ecosystems we had ever seen before or since. An ecosystem so complex it was prone to failure or self-destruction, as we later learned. Our scanning and biology tech is a lot more advanced than human tech ever was, so one single blood sample taught us more than any human study would have ever done. Reginald himself, as it turned out, had a sort of congenital dysfunction in a vestigial organ, as he called it, the appendix. We quickly realised this appendix organ would be rupturing, causing a lot more harm if left untreated. This time we were able to justify a breach of protocol, and performed a short but necessary surgery procedure on him. This procedure, though short, taught us a lot more about human biology. Once Reginald had been put in recovery, we quarantined him again. We would waste no time in deploying a small team of heavily armed warriors and technicians to the planet's surface to start working on a cure, or at least a better sterilization agent than we created earlier. As we were later admonished heavily for by our commanders, the agent we developed when we came here was not a cure for bacteria. Rather, it was indeed a sterilization agent, one far more potent than we expected. The zombie creature had so many strains of bacterial infection, our scanners failed to actually distinguish a target, and created an agent that killed all of it. Cells, matter, flesh, bacterial colonies, all of it. This breach of protocol was more egregious than we thought it was, and it, as Reginald put it, bitch-slapped us back to reality. We began stringent reforms of ship operations and went back to doing things the way we were supposed to. At least until we found an intact vehicle known as a Peterbilt. Heavy vehicles with massive force of engine power, built for the sake of towing and hauling mercilessly heavy loads, far beyond the galactic norm by a huge margin. Modular designs and many different variations of engine and trailer meant this was a multi-utility vehicle. Truly incredible. This distraction was remedied with the rapid arrival of a Skakandi response fleet. We were nowhere near ready to accomplish anything, as the planet was now under a state of biohazardous quarantine thanks to recent revelations. Their arrival made us return to protocol and forget the truck for the moment. Mostly I sat quietly in my chair on the bridge, as their communications unit called us. The screen appeared, showing the oddly crab-like form of a Skakandi hive officer. Honourable crew of the Secondus Incarna exploratory craft, this is Grandmaster Tenneth Oliver of the Skakandi Imperium, 7th Cohort. How copy? The radio chimed, interrupting our drawling over the large cargo vehicle. Honourable Grandmaster Tessenth, we copy loud and clear. I am Captain Meridius V of Clan Orm, Serenai Confederacy. Please be aware this planet is under quarantine and no action is to be taken on the planetary surface. We have seen some rather concerning anomalies, I replied calmly. Oh, don't worry, I have seen the reports. I have also seen how you narrowly avoided a full criminal trial, he replied, with that all-too-telling tone. You will have to forgive us for that, but you saw the reports. Can you really blame us? In any case, we are actively attempting to pursue a remedy to the biohazard at present. Saranai and Oracanth DNA appears to be resistant or entirely immune to it, though we are taking steps. Please send over some data for cross-reference and analysis. We need more data to work with, I asked, typing notes on my console. I can do better than that. Once I heard of the quarantine measures, I specifically went to one of your neighbouring colonies and commandeered a medical frigate from your fleet. I have had them retrofitted with some extra gear from our own ships. Hopefully this will bring it to a fast end. Now, with that out of the way, tell me, he said, a strange glint in his eyes. Yes? Is it true that you found trains and rail networks that work with steam engines? He asked. I could clearly see on the viewing screen behind him a few of his officers had suddenly stopped their tasks and were now listening in. Well, yes, actually. We scanned one that had derailed off its tracks before we started to go temporarily insane, I guess. I will send those scans over immediately, I replied calmly, and pressed a few buttons in response. The commander released a strange, happy squeal of delight and coughed, in a clearly fake manner to regain his composure. We will consider this data. I will send the medical frigate to do a proper decontamination procedure with more advanced equipment. Is there anything you need? I smirked at his response. Besides some more food supply to accommodate our guests, not really. We will do another biohazard sweep. One of our researchers got bitten by the zombie creatures, and is in quarantine as well, voluntarily, I said, showing a picture of the Verusian scientist, Kal-Eld, in her chamber, calmly reading a book. Observe any effects? I see from these reports that bites and scratches are the method of transmission. Should I be concerned? He asked. Well, Reginald, that's the name of the human we have on board, who told us that the infection kills within a few hours. It's been a full day, and Kal-Eld hasn't even shown any signs of abnormal symptoms. No signs of any immune response. It's as if the infection hasn't recognized her biology as something to target. Very damn strange, I replied, with a note of concern. What does that mean exactly? Any theories? He asked. Well, I don't have any right to speculate, especially after so much silliness since we had gotten here, but we have taken a basic look at the virus that causes this. It shows signs of manipulation, or at least signs of coaxing. We aren't really sure what to make of it, I said, furrowing my brow. But time for that later. We will see. We have a team down on the surface collecting samples and watching behavioural patterns. We will have answers soon enough. Oh, good. I take it they actually followed protocol this time, he said with a chuckle and smile. Let's get this over with. The Discovery team is on the planet's surface, setting up still. We made sure to include heavy defences, considering the circumstances. They will be getting samples to send under maximum biohazardous safety precautions, probably before the local day is concluded. We will send all the relevant data to the medical frigate soon, I replied, and started setting up our ship for docking procedures. Transferring you to the Alarai. Head Officer Kalbanith of Clan Olivai is on station, he said. What? The Kalabinth? The Corbinith that found the cure for the Red Death? I bellowed in shock. A second holoscreen appeared, and showed the very recognizable face of the greatest scientist of the Saranai came into view. I instinctively puffed my chest with pride as a very studious-looking, very tired-looking individual glared back at me. Carbonith! Master Medicae, your presence truly honours us, I said with a bow of my head. Oh, come on, it wasn't that impressive. Any monkey with a basic knowledge of gene sequencing could have done it, he replied, with a dismissive eye roll. Great humility as always, Master Medicae. What do you need from us? I asked. We will dock up and clean up first. Then I will take a look at all of your data and visit this human you have, he said. The conversation was quickly interrupted by the officer in charge of the away team. My Lord Captain, the shuttle is returning for retrieval. 2 guardsmen and 1 passenger on board. The head of security will debrief on arrival. We could hear another voice in the background. It was the sound of wailing, babbling, and crying. Understood. Hangar is open and ready to receive. Proceed to Bay 47, I commanded, and set the ship to General Quarters Alert. The holoscreens went blank as the 2 officers cut communications. I shrugged and headed to the hangar myself to see what was going on. The ship landed in a hangar, the air seal engaged, and suddenly the whole room filled with a pained screaming, mixed with frantic incoherent babbling. It was a child, human, female, screaming as the security team quickly handed her over to the medical unit on board our ship. She was in a horrible state. One of the zombie things managed to get hold of her left arm. The limb hung at the elbow, covered in blood, with the red goo leaking everywhere, as the part was barely connected to the bone by a few strings of flesh and muscle. The security team made the correct choice in following procedure and putting a tourniquet on the arm. The blood was pouring from the loose end of the arm. The sight made all but the medical crew retch in horror and disgust, barely able to keep together as they put the child on a gurney and hurried her to the medbay. The screams quickly faded away, and we started the arduous process of cleaning the trail of blood that now saturated the floor of the shuttle and hangar bay. That wouldn't have been more than a few minutes of flight time. On one hand, shocked that despite the damage, a child, was still conscious and screaming, let alone still alive with that level of damage. The medical team would probably figure out how to reattach the limb as we considered what we were going to do. I left the hangar and headed to Reginald's holding cell. He was lying on his bed, humming to himself. "Reginald," I said. "Oh, hi, just counting ceiling tiles. There are 384, he said with a bored sigh. "How long does it take for the zombie virus thing to take effect from a bite?" I asked, a sense of urgency in my voice. "Is there a difference between adults and children?" "Yep, there's a difference. With adults, like 20 or so, it takes like maybe 6 to 8 hours at most to die. Once dead, you turn almost immediately after the heart stops. With kids, like younger than 15 or so, it's almost instant, maybe an hour at most. Then again, it all depends on whether or not you actually get bitten. Sometimes the Zeds will just tear you apart. They'll grab you, tear off an arm or something to stop you from running, then try to eat you. If it's just that, then, well, yeah. Generally, after a limb is lost, you're screwed one way or another, so generally we just, end it there," he said with a shrug. "Well, we have a team on the planet's surface. They hastily returned with a child whose left arm has been torn off at the elbow." "You fucking what?" Reginald yelled and got up off his seat. I couldn't say much more as he bolted, with more speed and agility than any creature his size had the right to move at, and before anyone could question anything, he was already down the corridor heading to the medbay. This whole situation brought the ship to a state of unease. A strange tension we had never experienced permeated the air. The security officer came up to me with a strained salute. "Report. We were in the process of setting up defenses. We heard some screaming coming from the woodlands. We approached to investigate and I don't want to talk about it. We used a plasma rifle to disintegrate the creature that was in pursuit and put a tourniquet on the wound to stop the bleeding. We didn't know what else to do, so the commander made a snap decision to just bring her on board for treatment," he said, his eyes hollow and empty. "According to Reginald, the zombies will sometimes simply cause grievous injury to their targets instead of eating them, so the chances are that the child will not be infected. We will enforce quarantine anyway," I commanded. "Take some time off. I will send a few men to replace your presence." "Yes, my lord," he slumped over, nervously shuffling as he made his way to his quarters. "A good decision," I heard a voice behind me say. It was Kalbanith, in the flesh, hunched over from his signature back injury from his days as a combat medic. I couldn't say anything as he raised a hand at me and gestured for me to walk with him. We both quickly made our way towards medbay. We could no longer hear the screaming. Reginald was sitting on a chair with his head in his hands, as 4 medical techs worked on the now unconscious child. Reginald saw me walk in and handed me an empty syringe. "What's this?" "Morphine. It's a very potent tranquilizer we use back home for surgeries and whatnot. I gave it to your tech so they can stop the screaming. I carried one on me just in case. Almost everybody does. A full dose will dull the pain after a bite or damage and calm us down. Push comes to shove, it slows the brain, so if we die in turn, it gives whoever we are with the chance to put us down or run. So, gave it to your techs and they figured it out, I guess," he explained. I looked at the child, and the medics were simply running scans on her arms and the damage. Deep scans, using the newest scanner we had on board. "Report," I commanded. "We are scanning the muscle structure and trying to figure out how to reattach the limb. It's proving to be more complex than expected. We have stopped the hemorrhage and the heartbeat has slowed. The human has informed us to be careful. If the heart slows too much, she will die, the head doctor said. Found it. Programming the mech. Please hold, the nurse said. Muscle structure is protein-based with many connections and multiple nerve endings. She will never be able to use her arm properly again, but she will not lose it entirely. Permission to proceed? The head doctor asked, gesturing at Reginald. Get on with it! Reginald bellowed with frustration. The team scrambled fast. Kalbanif hobbled over to the surgery table and put some gear on as per protocol as the two worked. He quietly pointed at specific things and did some on-the-fly programming as a surgical mech arm rapidly assembled the torn limb. A truly fascinating species, Kalbanif said to himself. Any signs of the infection? I asked. Negative, sir. No signs of the actual viral infection. I think the limb was just torn off and, the nurse said, then causing all of us to collectively shiver in horror. This is so much worse than we imagined. Why does this make me feel so angry? I said idly. Makes you angry? The fuck you think it makes us feel like? Been dealing with this shit for a year now. We've had to make worse choices. Ever seen a newborn and her mother get torn apart by a pack of 10 of them? I have. Ever seen an entire town get wiped out by a swarm of hundreds of them? I have. This is nothing, Reggie said, angrily smacking the door with his fist before leaving to return to his quarters. We all stood in silence and let the medics work. It didn't take them long as the protein sequencer device reassembled her arm. It wasn't perfect, but it was at least still there. She wouldn't have too fine motor control, but the arm and hand were still usable. She probably would need to learn how to use it again. During this process, we got a scan from the ground team that allowed us to see what the zombie virus was. A mixture of a bacterial infection caused by a rogue, misfolded protein prion. Kalbanif looked at the data. Reginald was nearby at the time and watched closely with us as we pored over it. Most unusual. Most unusual. Such a strange pathogen, Kalbanif said as he looked at the data. What? Reggie asked. This pathogen is one of the oddest strains of infectious disease I have ever seen. I can clearly see the delineation in the evolutionary timeline. It evolved fast. Couldn't be more than maybe 20 years old. It's definitely rooted in a bioweapon, though. You can tell there is some actual engineering going on here, but then it just stops. Bioengineering is linear and controlled. It's like a straight line. Natural evolution is like a zigzag pattern or a circular motion. See? Starts with a straight line and ends in a squiggle, he replied. Well, that makes sense. Bioweapons were always outlawed for obvious reasons back in the day, but we never actually used them as bioweapons, I hope, Reggie said. Pardon? How is that? Well, we used to make vaccines and other stuff for viruses, figure out how they work and shit. We didn't have the fancy scanner tech you guys have, so we had to do it the hard way. Make a virus, see how it works, then make the cure based on how it works. We used to make viruses of our own in order to figure out how they worked, so we could then figure out how to cure other viruses with similar symptoms and methods of transmission, virology and stuff. At least I think that's how we did it, Reggie said. Sometimes those viruses got out due to negligence or some other stupid mistake. Or theft. Or mismanagement. Or something. So, I guess it makes sense. That explains how it started life as a straight line, but these patterns make no sense. It looks like it went through 12 variations of itself with a dozen different DNA mixes to get to where it is now, Kalbanif said, tracing his bony finger across the screen. The screen showed a line that basically spelled out his evolutionary roots, starting life as a straight line, then turning into a jagged squiggle, then a curvy wave, then a sharp angle, then the pattern changed again and again. As far as I can tell, this virus started its life as a bioweapon, or some kind of viral test, but it was so mild that it did no damage, and acquired a DNA evolution from another virus that infected the host. Then it jumped forward, still mild enough it only qualified as a mild infection. It carried on doing this for 20 more years until... Kalbanif said, tracing the line. Until it hit a trigger point that made it go berserk, I said, noting how the squiggly line suddenly went straight, then had a sharp turn to a jagged peak. It looked as though the virus at this point had been noticed, and was undergoing experimentation for treatment. Then, something happened that caused a sudden evolutionary breakout. A chemical response to an antibiotic, or medication perhaps, that caused its prion-based code to suddenly go insane. The straight line here is simply an accelerant that made it go haywire. What were they doing here that made it do this, though? I have never seen an evolutionary path that's like this, he said, tracing the line and pointing out specific points. Well, that does make sense. Viruses and plagues and stuff have been with us since the beginning. Syphilis, the Black Death, the common cold, H1N1, influenza, malaria, so many different things. We have to have a relatively strong immune system to deal with all that nonsense, so... Yeah, Reggie said. How do you know all this? You are supposed to be a forest ranger, if I recall correctly. Your job isn't necessarily virology, I asked. Well, I spent hours alone, bored, looking at trees, so when things were calm outside of fire season, I spent a lot of time watching YouTube and reading Wikipedia, because, boredom. So, yeah. Did you know that the Hoover Dam produces an average of 4 billion kilowatt-hours of hydroelectric power each year due to nothing but the force of flowing water? Yeah. I had to do something to keep busy, so I browsed the internet, Reggie explained with a shrug. We shared glances of concern and amazement. What's an internet? I asked. You guys don't have the internet? What? Reggie exclaimed with a strange smirk. I shook my head and paid more attention. Explain, please. The internet is a global network of billions of computers and other electronic devices. With the internet, it's possible to access almost any information, communicate with anyone else in the world, and do much more. In short, the internet is a network of computers connected together over long distances that share and store information. The internet is basically what defined the entire planet for the last... It's 2042 right now. Just about the last 50 years or so. Basically, it's one big, massive, complicated open-source communications network, Reggie replied. We just glared at him, bewildered. The longer I stay here, the more I like this place despite the... trauma? Kalbanif remarked casually, as he resumed his work. Well, the networks have been down since month 1, so in order to recover that data, you have to repower the network and get those computers back online. I've heard rumors of some new towns and settlements popping up. I've also heard of some weird activity being done at the hospital near my tower. That was weeks ago, though, so... not sure how accurate that is. Might want to check all that out, Reggie explained calmly. Well, one way or another, I have all the data I could ask for. Healthy human, injured human, and apparently the scan data from a captured infected undead human. I will start work immediately and see what I can find. Once I have relevant samples and my lab set up, I can begin the real work. I would advise not engaging in any serious work planet-side until I have some idea of what we can expect. I need to see if this virus evolves faster or slower. Maybe we are immune for now, but won't be in the future, Kalbanif said and started working. Reggie and I headed back to the medbay. The techs had finished their work and the child's arm was back on, wrapped in bandages and cleaned up. Reggie moved close to her and gently moved some hair out of her face. This was apparently enough to stir her from her sleep. Hey, sweetie. Hey. How you feel, huh? You okay? He said softly. My arm hurts a bit when I move it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Well, that's good. See? Reggie said, as she gently showed her the bandages. Good as new, see? No nasty zombie bite or nasty hurty anymore. All fixed. How's that? My arm was all like... it hurt a lot and now it's not hurting, she said tearfully. It's okay. It's okay. Shh. Calm down. You're safe here. No need to cry. Do you remember your name? What's your name? Mine is Reggie, he said, gently wiping a tear off her cheek. My name's Stacy. Where am I? She sniffled a bit. Want to know something fun? You are in space, Reggie said. She looked at him with a crooked brow. You're silly. We can't be in space. Our heads aren't exploding. Well, yeah, we aren't in space, but we are in a spaceship in space, Reggie said with a smirk.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. How are we in space, though? Daddy said we don't have space stuff, so... yeah,
Stacy said. Well, want to see something super cool?
Yeah,
she squealed happily. Reggie signaled me to come closer and show myself. I stood there in view of the child, and let her take a look at me. Space aliens! Aliens in space! Is that super cool or what? Reggie asked. For a while it seemed like she went into some kind of shock, as she just stared at me.
He looks funny. What's with the long neck?
She squealed, and pointed with a giggle. I felt self-conscious all of a sudden, and tried to make myself look a bit shorter. That's because he's an alien. They have long necks. You didn't see them before? They brought you here after you got hurt, after all, Reggie asked.
Well, I didn't see anything. It hurt too much and I was crying. I couldn't see. I just saw big things and walls and ran towards it. I thought it was home.
Fair enough. I guess when I was panicking, I'd go towards the nearest big wall or something. What were you up to in the forest by yourself? He asked.
I was looking for firewood and got pounced on by a rotty thing. I didn't see it before I yanked my arm. I just ran as fast as I could. I think it got stuck under a tree or something, then started chasing me, she replied. Reggie quickly calmed her down and wiped more tears from her face. Well, that's all over now. Your mum and dad still around? He asked. Yep, at least I think so. We have a home in, what do they call it? Sanctuary or something? Daddy works at the vet and Mummy stays home with my baby brother, she replied with a smile. Sanctuary City. I've traded with them a few times over the last year. Used to be a town outside of Burbank near the highway. Blocked off with military hardware and scrap metal barricades. Turned into what is basically the only place I know of nearby that I can get supplies from. Haven't been there in weeks though, Reggie said, looking at me. That is good to know. I will send a platoon of drones down because the planet is still under quarantine. Now we know what we are dealing with, we can calibrate their sensory networks to respond to the infected accordingly. We can keep the place properly guarded at least. Extra firepower never hurts, I said calmly. True, Dad. I ran out of ammo before you guys showed up, Reggie replied. Indeed. I will get started with drone patrols and drone operations. The scientists will do their work and we will see what happens after that. Now, let's let her rest and see if we can get her home, I said, and left the room. Kalbanif burst in the room and grabbed me. He stared at me. I found the trigger. The trigger that caused the zombie mutation. You're not gonna fucking believe this, he yelled.